and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian, and I'm streaming to you live from Budapest here in Hungary. I hope everybody is having a good weekend so far, staying healthy, staying productive. Hi, Ashraf. This class is a question and answers class to know it all about the exam. It is for our members. Of course, everybody is welcome to watch. You can definitely pick up some valuable information from the class. To become a member of our YouTube channel, click the join button next to the subscribe button. If you don't see that, send me an email and I will help you further. My email address is adrian@aehelp.com. And coming up in 90 minutes, I will host a class where everybody can join the chat. That will be for speaking part 3. Hi, Jainil. Hi, Rajveer. Hi, Hassan. These lessons are presented to you by aehelp.com for academic IELTS success. Check us out there. And for general IELTS help, visit us at gieltshelp.com. On both of our websites, we have original practice exams for you, computer-based practice exams that you can do on your phone, tablet, computer. We also have loads and loads of videos in HD, pre-recorded. You can check those out. Our academic website looks like this with the blue background. You can click that big red button to join there. And the general version has the green background. You can click that big red button to join us there. Of course, you can also download our apps. Academic IELTS Help, the app, links to aehelp.com, and General IELTS Help app links to gieltshelp.com. So hopefully everybody is making good use of those. There's lots of free materials for you as well on both the websites and the app. You can get our exam books from Amazon. Search Amazon for AE Helps Academic IELTS or GE Helps General IELTS. You can get it in digital or paperback version. So students, members, question and answer session today, which means the stage is yours. My goal here is to give you answers to your questions, and I will take questions in the order that you ask them. Hi, Ferdovs, good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. Leah, nice to see you as well. Abhishek, good to see you. So go ahead, students, members, whatever questions you have that may have come up during your studies, or during your search about IELTS, go ahead and ask them from me, and I will do my best, of course, to answer them for you. So I'll take them in the order that you're asking, unless they are connected, then I'll try to make a connection. Okay, Leah says, can you tell us a little bit about the computer-based exam, please? Leah, the computer-based exam, the questions themselves are very similar to the paper-based exam, but of course it's delivered through the computer. There are examples, Leah, for the computer-based exam through the British Council's website. So Leah's asking, how does the computer-based exam, let's write it out, based exam work? Same idea, you register for your exam, Leah. You go to a test center for the computer-based exam, so it's not like the IELTS indicator that you do from home, but the computer-based exam, you actually go to a test center. You get set up with a computer, a headset so that you can do the listening section, and then basically it's automated. It takes you through the different parts, the listening, reading, writing, and of course you should have really good touch typing skills when you're doing that. The timing is very similar to the paper-based exam as well. And Leah, if you want to see the format, the exact format of the computer-based exam, you should check out the British Council's website. So there are examples of the CBE exam or CBE on British Councils. Just do a search for it. website. Now, for the speaking section, Leah, the computer-based exam is exactly the same as the paper-based exam. So for the speaking, you have to go and do an interview. It's usually one day after or before the actual sit-down section of the exam. You have some functions in the computer-based exam, some control functions on the keyboard, so it's good to be familiar with those. Like you can copy paste, for example, in some parts, but you cannot search. So there's no control F or control find function there, okay? So otherwise, the computer-based exam, again, the questions follow a very similar format. You'll see fill in the blanks, true, false, not given, list of headings, and so on, okay? One difference, Leah, in the listening section is you don't have to transfer your answers to the answer sheet because you enter it directly into the fields that are given. And you do have some paper and pencil where you can take some notes if you need to. So that should be provided. Okay, you should have that there with you as well. All right. Okay, so I think that kind of, without going into a lot of detail, Leah, that covers the computer-based exam, the question. Hopefully that answers most of what you were thinking, okay, in general terms. All right. Rajveer is asking, when should I use which and that to combine different clauses? I always find it challenging to use them accurately. Yeah, Rajveer, that's a really good question. I think that's confusing for native speakers as well. To be honest, sometimes I'm confused as well. Sometimes Grammarly will correct my which to that. They're mostly interchangeable, Rajveer. Usually people tend to overuse which. In a lot of cases, you can use that instead of which. So Rajveer is asking, when do I use that and when do I use which? Okay. They're very close in meaning. Okay, so these two are definitely close. And the good news here, Rajveer, is you will not lose marks if you use which instead of that. So you can still get a band 9, unless it's really awkward, Rajveer, but if you accidentally use a which instead of a that in your writing, that's not going to be a deal breaker, okay? So you can still get a band 9 if you do that, okay? Which is usually used for objects. That is used for ideas more. Okay. So, but not always. It's a little bit tricky. And to be perfectly honest with you, Rajveer, instead of telling you something that's off base, I would definitely recommend researching this a little bit online. Okay. So to give everybody an example of what Rajveer is thinking of here, here's an example. So the fruit which has the sweetest flavor is strawberries. Okay, versus the fruit that has the sweetest. Why the fruit that has the sweetest flavor is strawberries. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. Personally, I would write this in the second form, Rajveer. So the fruit that has the sweetest flavor is strawberries. Just because we don't know all of the other fruits that we're thinking about here. But if we knew, like, there are 3 fruits that we're talking about, let's say apples, kiwi, and strawberries, then I would say the fruit which has the sweetest flavor is strawberries. So I guess often we use which when we know the selection from the group, and we use that when it's generalized, maybe something like that. But you have to check into that, Rajveer, again, to be honest with you. I'll look into it myself a little bit. That's one that I don't know the perfect answer to. Okay? But again, it's not a deal breaker. So that's probably why I've never looked into it as well. All right? Okay. So, Rajveer is asking, is there any grammar rule to use them effectively? I have a feeling there is, Rajveer, if we dig deep enough. I mean, there are linguists that specialize in these kinds of grammar rules. And if you actually look at a grammar rule book for English at the highest level, it's a book that's about 2,000 pages. I've seen it. One of my friends did linguistics in university, so there are a lot of little rules. It's virtually impossible to perfect the English language, but I would guess that there is a rule for this as well. Okay. Yeah, restrictive or non-restrictive, Rajveer, that's exactly what I'm talking about here. So here, the fruit that has the sweetest flavor of strawberries is non-restrictive because we don't know the group of fruits that we're talking about. If we have an idea of the fruits, then I would use which, and that's restrictive. I believe that's what it is as well. Okay. All right. Yeah, and you're saying that is used to indicate a specific object, item, person, condition, while which is used to add information to objects, items, people. Yeah, I think that's right, Rajveer. I'll look into it and then get back to you guys on that in the next class maybe. Okay, good question. It's a challenging one. I like a challenge. All right, let's see the next question. So Pooja. Individuals can do nothing to improve the environment. Only governments and large companies can make a difference. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Can we partially agree here? Okay. I would actually disagree there, Pooja. Think about the logic of the question. So individuals can do nothing. Individuals can do a lot to improve the environment, not only governments. So I would actually disagree, not partially agree. Okay, does that make sense, Pooja, the logic there? So if you ask me that as a question, let's forget about writing here. Let's take it into speaking. If you say, hey, Adrian, individuals can do nothing to improve the environment, only governments and large companies. To what extent do you agree or disagree? I would say I completely disagree because humans, individuals can make a big difference for the environment. Big changes start with small steps. So I would completely disagree there and give 2 points on how individuals can do a lot and not only governments. Okay, so does that make sense why I would completely disagree there, Pooja? There are some rare questions, Pooja, where you can partially agree, but you have to be really careful. Usually the questions, Pooja, where you can partially agree, it's very, very obvious, okay? So the negative and the positive should be quite clear. They're rare, okay? So partially agree answers are rare, and I definitely recommend avoiding that answer whenever possible, okay? Because it makes for a weaker essay, okay? I have seen a couple cases. Nothing's coming to mind right now, but there's definitely some examples out there, okay? All right. Hassan Sadiq is saying, in the pie and bar charts, which one is better to create a sentence, by using an auxiliary verb or a normal verb? For example, teachers' salaries were 40% of the total, or teachers' salaries made up 40% of the total. Okay. That's a good question, Hassan. So auxiliary verb versus normal verb. I would say both. I would probably interchange them. Technically speaking, Hassan, the example teachers' salaries were 40% of the total. So using a normal verb would be better. It's simpler. You're always looking to be more simple. But made up 40% of the total is also good if you're writing multiple sentences, just to show that you're able to use both. So I would use both, okay, just to have grammar range in your writing, okay. So Hassan's asking, what is the main difference between the auxiliary verb or the normal verb in the sentence? Okay, you're actually using, so in this case, the auxiliary verb is part of a phrasal verb, Hassan. So make up. Okay, anybody know what that means? It's a phrasal verb. And it's an auxiliary verb because you have also the preposition up. So here, make up means composed. Okay, so that's why it's good to show that range of vocabulary, Hassan. So you could also say teachers' salaries composed 40% of the total. Auxiliary verbs, so just to make that really clear for everybody, auxiliary means it's an addition of a verb, okay? Auxiliary means an addition, a plus, okay? So I'll give you an example with the word auxiliary, Hassan, so you can understand what that word means. The building was provided with auxiliary power from diesel generators. Okay. So here in this sentence, I'm using this word auxiliary, and then this will make more sense when you're learning your grammar rules as well. So the building was provided with auxiliary power from diesel generators. I guess I could have said something simpler, like the laptop was provided with auxiliary power from a battery pack. But basically this means that the building probably has some kind of power from the grid. That's the main power, but maybe there was a shortage of power, so extra power came from an outside source, which in this case was a diesel generator. So in grammar, you see in present perfect, so I have studied English for 10 years. Okay, so in this case, have is the auxiliary verb which creates the present perfect sentence. Studied is the main verb because that's the action verb, and have is the auxiliary verb, okay? So when you have a phrasal verb like make up to mean composed, then sometimes we'll refer to that verb as an auxiliary verb in the phrase. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, Hassan, so is that clear on phrasal verbs? Hi, Yosef. Welcome to the group of lessons. All right. Lots of questions. Good. So is that clear, Hassan, about auxiliary verbs or auxiliary whatever? Auxiliary means it's added, it's attached on as an extra to create some kind of a situation or grammar. For example, present perfect or passive uses auxiliary verbs. Is that clear? So that's your extra verb. Okay, be is often an auxiliary verb. So when you're creating a progressive type sentence, right? So I am running in the morning, then am is the auxiliary verb for the progressive ing. Running is the main verb. Okay, it's like the extra, it's like the generator for the building, the extra source of power. Okay. Hope that makes sense. So there are 2 points to be clear on: the meaning of auxiliary and what that means in grammar, the second. Okay. All right. Let's take another question. So good question about that. So in your example, Hassan, again, you're using a verb were in one and a phrasal verb in the other. Okay. Samuel is asking a question. Is it good to be consistent and clear in what we speak or use? Complicates lengthy sentences in the speaking section. Samuel, let me try to figure out exactly what you're asking. Is it good to be consistent, I think is what you're asking there. Consistent and clear in what we say or use complicated and lengthy sentences. Okay, yeah, I see what you're asking. That's a good question, Samuel. So Samuel's asking, should I be consistent in my speaking or use complicated and lengthy sentences? All right. That's kind of a tricky question, Samuel, because in your speaking, you definitely want to be consistent with your ideas. You want to be consistent in your information. Okay, so the answer is you should be consistent with your answers and make connections among your answers in the speaking. However, okay, within this consistency, you should show a broad range of grammar and give clear explanations, details, and examples. So in your question, Samuel, to answer that clearly, being consistent and showing complicated grammar or giving a lengthy answer, which includes an answer, explanation, example, those are not different. Okay, so you can be consistent and clear and also use complicated sentences that are lengthy. But having said that, Samuel, definitely don't overspeak or go off topic. Okay, so you must not overspeak and go off topic. Now, one interesting phenomenon that I see often with students speaking and work is using lengthy sentences with complex vocabulary where it really doesn't make sense. Okay, so in your official IELTS exam, you should only use vocabulary and grammar that you're absolutely certain is accurate. Very often I'll get essays from students or even recordings of speakings where it sounds like the student is using a thesaurus or translator through maybe Google Translate, and the information is coming across very awkward and sometimes quite incomprehensible, so very difficult to understand. Okay, so you must use only vocabulary and grammar that you are certain is correct in context, as much as possible, of course, right? I respect that, you know, English is not your native language, so you can't always be 100% sure, but many times candidates are using vocabulary in awkward ways, which create confusion and really lower band scores. Okay, so don't do that. All right, I especially see that with a lot of students in India specifically. I've seen that quite often where I get an essay and it's using a lot of very complex grammar or high-level vocabulary, but it really doesn't make sense. So just because you're using unique vocabulary, you're not going to get a good mark. You'll get a much better mark if you use clear everyday vocabulary accurately. Okay. Hope that answers your question, Samuel. So being confident and concise and clear is definitely the most important, Samuel. Yeah, it's more important than being lengthy and complicated without being sure of what you're saying. That will really lower your score. Okay. Fluency and coherence are the most important points there. All right, let's see the next one. So Bhumi's asking, yesterday, why should we discuss energy first and then time in task 2? Yeah, okay, good question, Bhumi. So the reason why it's good to discuss energy first is because energy ties into time hierarchically, okay? So Bhumi's asking, yesterday's task 2, why did we discuss energy first? The answer there, Bhumi, is energy ties into time more smoothly than vice versa. Okay. So not only does it save energy, but also time. Now, the other reason, Bhumi, time is kind of unique because time is arguably our most valuable commodity. Okay, we don't know how much of it we have. We're always just using it. Nobody knows when they are in their last hour of life, usually. So time is arguably our most valuable asset. So you always want to emphasize the point that's the most valuable last in your essay as well. Okay, so emphasizing time as the second point is arguably even more valuable than emphasizing energy. So that's why energy then time. Okay, it's debatable, Bhumi, but I think time reads better as the second opinion. Okay. Ashraf is asking, can we write in the conclusion, I'm inclined to agree? Yeah, you can. It's perfectly good English, Ashraf. I'm inclined to agree. It means that I agree, or I'm motivated to agree. Sure, you can use that. Why not? Okay. All right, Dr. Krishna is saying, sir, in the CBT, are we provided paper for rough work, especially in listening? Yeah, so what I heard, we asked that question from British Council, and what I heard is there is a piece of paper and a pen there at the beginning for you that you can use to take notes or jot down ideas. If you don't see that, you should be able to ask for it, okay? But they should have it there. There's some kind of a paper there that's provided, yes, in the CBT. If you don't see it, you should be able to ask for it. I seem to remember asking that from our British Council partners, and they said, yes, there is a piece of paper that you can use for notes, okay, for the computer-based exam. So Janil is saying, I have difficulty in a noun clause. Can you give a little bit of points and explain? Okay, so noun clause. Okay. A lot of grammar questions here today. Okay, so what is a noun clause? Okay. So the noun can be a clause. A clause just means a phrase that creates an element in the sentence. Okay, so the most basic sentence, Janil, as you know, is subject plus verb plus object. Okay, so this sentence can have a noun for the subject, obviously, and a noun for the object. Now, the noun can be something really simple. Okay, so we can have something like, I ate red, or let's keep it more simple, I ate an apple. Okay. So here we have two nouns, the noun I, okay, which is a pronoun in this case. And of course, we have the noun apple, okay? Now you can create a noun clause from either the apple or either the I by giving more information and creating a more descriptive noun or a more descriptive noun here using the clause, okay? So there's there's adverbial clauses, noun clauses, adjective clauses, okay, so I ate an apple. I ate an... Let me try to think of a good noun clause here for you. So I ate an apple that I had found on the floor. All right. So I ate... Sorry, let's get that "and" back in there. Thinking of adjectives a second ago. Okay, I ate an apple that I had found on the floor. So the apple now becomes a more descriptive noun because it's not just any apple, it's the apple that I had found on the floor. So it's that unique apple. So now this becomes your noun clause, the apple that I had found on the floor, okay? So any element that gives more detail to the noun becomes the noun clause. Does that make sense that way without giving or going into too much detail? Okay. All right. Let's see. The next question. You're welcome, Leah. Okay, and those are the other ones, Rajveer. Okay. Yeah, so Pooja is saying, what can be the 2 points for the thesis in that one? I'll write a thesis for that one, Pooja. So this is going back to Pooja's question about individuals are not able to help the environment, only governments and industry can do this. To what extent do you agree? So my thesis could be something like this. I completely disagree that individuals, that only governments and industries or industry can save the environment, as individuals can make changes in their daily routines, as well as actively participate in environmental can make changes in their daily routines as well as actively help the environment. Okay, so that could be a thesis, for example, Pooja. So in this case, what I would do is I would write one body paragraph about how individuals can use less water to brush their teeth, for example, or recycle, for example. That's one way to help the environment. And then the other way to help the environment would be actively. You could go out, clean up the neighborhood, plant trees, go around and explain to people, educate people on saving the environment, go to the forest and stop the forestry industry from cutting down trees. So individuals can actively save the environment, as well we can passively, through changing our daily routines, save the environment as well. So that could be your 2 thesis points. Does that make sense, Pooja? Okay. Is that clear? And there could be a few more, but those are the first two that came to mind, just visualizing the situation, right? Like if I'm an individual, I want to save the environment, what can I do? Well, one simple act that I can do is just pay more attention to using reusable coffee mug instead of a disposable coffee mug, stop using plastic straws. And then another way I can save the environment is say, this Saturday, I'm going to go out and plant 50 trees. Okay, so that could be my active saving the environment action. Okay, does that make sense, Pooja? Is that clear? All right. Mustafa is asking, why do I keep messing up the vowels when I type words, especially I and E? Okay, cool. Mustafa, there's kind of a, there's a rule in English that kids learn in school. So Mustafa is saying, why do I mess up the order of vowels, especially I, E? Okay, so there is a kind of a rhyme, Mustafa, that kids learn in school, and it goes like this. The rule is I before E except after C. So that's what every child, I think, in grade 2 or grade 3 in English-speaking countries learns from their teacher. The rule is I before E except after C. So if the word has a C in it, then the rule changes. Now, unfortunately, there are a few exceptions to this rule, Mustafa. So some of you are probably saying, oh, well, what about the word science? So there are a few exceptions to this rule, like science. Okay, so you can see here that the word is science, S-C-I-E-N-C-E. Here, the I comes before the E, even though it's after C. So this is an exception to the rule. But in most situations, Mustafa, the I is before E, except if it's after C. Okay? So, for example, just a couple to make that clear. So, friend. Okay? So, the word friend, you see it's I before E, there's no C. Okay? So, most words, the order of I and E is like this as long as there's no C before the I. Okay? If there's a C before the I, then it comes after. Okay? So, let me think of one. Scenic. No, that's not a good one. Let me try to think of an example here with a C. You can help me out here, members, if you can think of some words that have a C, I, and an E. Okay, except for science, which is the exception. Okay, let me see if any of you can come up with the word. You're really testing my brains here. Yeah, there you go. Rajveer says receive. Thank you. Any other ones? Yeah, so there you can see that rule of I before E except after C. So here it's C-E-I-V, okay? Conceive or perceive. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there you have lots of examples. So Mustafa, notice how here it's C-E-I. So, but in other cases, it's always I before E if there's no C. Okay, so as long as you keep that in mind, you'll be okay. There's just a couple exceptions like science. Okay, science is an example. Okay, Rajveer says receipt. Yeah. Okay, so E before I when it's after C. Okay. Mustafa, good? Does that help with that kind of vowel trickery? Just remember that little rhyme that's taught, okay? So I before E except after C. Okay, it rhymes. I before E except after C. Mustafa's like, got it, okay? Couple exceptions. You can even type that into Google, Mustafa. I before E except after C exceptions, and it'll show you like the 3 or 4 that are unique. Science is the only one that comes to mind right now, but that's it, okay? All right. Good questions today, members. Lots of different questions that are making me think about what I learned in grammar in grade 3 all the way up to what I learned in grammar in university. So good on you. You're really pushing my brain to fire on all pistons. Good for you. Okay, Ferdov says, could you explain how to create long sentences with 3 or more dependent parts? Thanks, Ferdov. You're just making it that much easier, right? Okay. Yeah, I can do that, Ferdovs, but I don't necessarily recommend attempting that in your writing on the IELTS or in your speaking. It could get really awkward, okay? So let's go back to this sentence here, okay, that I already started with, I ate an apple that I had found on the floor. So Ferdovs is saying, how can I create a complex sentence? So how can I continue to increase the complexity of the sentence, adding more and more elements to it? Okay, so Ferdovs, here what you need to do is you need to remember, first of all, your subordinating conjunctions and your adjective clauses. Okay, so your subordinating conjunctions, you have time, right? You have cause and effect. You have condition, and you have opposition. Okay, so you have those 4 kinds of subordinate clauses, which create your independent, dependent elements, right? So I ate an apple that I had found on the floor. When? Right? So I ask a question here for Dobbs. When did I eat the apple? So before I felt my stomach ache, I ate an apple that I had found on the floor. So now I've created a more complex sentence by creating a time condition, right? So before I felt my stomach ache, I ate an apple that I had found on the floor. So now I have this dependent clause here, and I have that noun clause that Janil was talking about there as well, okay? And I can continue to make this more and more complex for Dobbs by asking further questions and developing the elements even more. So I ate an apple that I had found on the floor. Why? Okay, so cause and effect here. So because I didn't want it to go to waste. Okay, so now I've created an even more complex sentence, right? And all I'm doing here is adding those questions. So before I felt my stomach ache, I ate an apple that I had found on the floor because I didn't want it to go to waste. So now I've created 2 of these dependent elements. And that's how you can do it for Dobbs. So you think about the subordinating conjunctions, the different ways, okay, that they work, and then you can add in more and more dependent clauses, okay? Does that make sense? So I don't want to keep going because then I'm afraid I'm going to encourage students to create these expansively complex sentences, which I don't want you to do for IELTS because you can get a very, very high band score without doing that, okay? This is not a PhD paper that you're handing in, so careful not to overdo it, okay? This is definitely complex enough, all right? So time, cause and effect, both in one sentence. They're two dependent clauses. All right. Samuel, very good. So Samuel's asking a really good question here. Samuel says, I keep using like in my speaking. How do I stop doing this? Okay, so that's a really good question, Samuel. A lot of other students use the same. They use like. Students often overuse like, or to be honest, or in my opinion. Okay. And definitely that's not good. So you don't want to be using this too much, even if it's part of your diction. Okay. So even though these words may be part of your diction, diction means your style of speaking, it is a good idea to train yourself to minimize this type of repetition. Okay? In order to do this, you have to record your speaking on your phone. Listen back and say it again without these fillers. Okay, so Samuel, what happens often is these become what's called fossilized mistakes in our speaking and even in our writing. There's a technical term for this. Linguists call it fossilized mistakes, saying the same word like or to be honest or in my opinion over and over and over again. Definitely for higher quality communication, it's a good idea to avoid that. Now, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, Samuel. You can still get a very good score on the IELTS exam as long as you're not using the word like to try to think about the word. Okay, so it's a big difference if you're using like because it's a part of your diction, your natural style of speaking, versus you're using like because you can't think about the vocabulary or the grammar. If you're using like because you can't think about the grammar vocabulary, your fluency mark, your grammar range mark, your lexical resource mark all go down. Okay. If you're using like because it's part of your natural diction, like I'm using it right now because you like using the word, then you're still going to do fine. Okay. The examiner can tell the difference of using these words as part of diction versus using these words to stall, means stop for time, to find vocabulary and grammar. Okay. All right. The more you improve your fluency, Samuel, the less you're going to use these words. But in order to do that, try to go through these steps that I'm telling you. So record yourself on the phone, re-speak, build your fluency, avoid the word like. Okay, so train your tongue and your brain to work better together in English and avoid these fillers whenever possible. Okay. You can use other fillers as well, Samuel. So using or as or just, those are also good fillers so that you have a range of fillers, not just the same filler over and over again. Okay. I'm going to stop on that note. I think that's a really good note to stop on. Definitely work on that point, students. So if you catch yourself using the same filler, like the word like or to be honest, too often, then work on improving that and getting that out of your language, okay? Build your fluency. Practice is the key there, okay? All right, so a lot of great questions today. Rajveer, you've got my interest perked. I'm definitely going to have a peek at the technical difference between using that and which. I definitely think you're onto something with restrictive and non-restrictives. But again, I don't think IELTS is at that level where you need to be overly familiar with that, but I'll definitely check that out. Maybe get back to you. Maybe I'll do a post on that on the community board, okay, Regvier? So I'll make a note for myself in a minute here, and then I'll throw that up on our community board so you can check out what my research yields with that and which. Very nice questions today, members. Some really good questions that made me think and made my work really, made my mind fire on all pistons. So thank you so much. Great questions. Keep it up. Curiosity is definitely an important element to being successful. Being curious and being confident, those are definitely two of the foundations and ingredients for success. So keep it up. Coming up in 30 minutes, I will host a class for speaking part 3 where we can hopefully apply some of the information that we looked at in this class. So hopefully I will see you there. For everybody watching, check us out at aehelp.com for academic IELTS and gieltshelp.com for general IELTS. I'm Adrian, signing out briefly from Budapest. Bye for now.